Well, I would like to welcome you all to this sixth program of the NAUA Academy. My name is Stephen Palmer. I'm a member of the Academy Advisory Committee, and I will serve as the host for this program. John Smith is supporting us with his technical expertise, which is considerable. Our presentation today focuses on the Parliament of the World's Religions. After the presentation, we'll have a 15 to 20-minute question and answer session, and that will be followed by breakout rooms where you may discuss the presentation or anything else you'd like to talk about. Our speaker today is Bruce Knotts. Many of you may know Bruce since he was the director of the Unitarian Universalist Office at the UN from 2008 until 2022. What you may not know is prior to that, Bruce served as a diplomat in the United States Department of State with assignments in Greece, Zambia, India, Pakistan, Kenya, Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire, and the Gambia, where he served as the Deputy Chief of Mission. Bruce has and is currently playing a leadership role in numerous international organizations which advocate for sexual orientation, gender identity rights, the rights of women and indigenous peoples, as well as for peace, disarmament, and world community. We are indeed fortunate that Bruce is now an active member of North American Unitarian Association, NAUA, and is a member of our advisory board of the NAUA Academy. Most relevant to this presentation, he is a trustee of the Parliament of the World's Religions, whose founding goals and work he is going to tell us about now. So without further ado, I will turn the program over to our speaker this evening, Bruce Knotts.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. It's great to be with you today. I have loved my 6 years as a trustee of the Parliament of the World's Religions. It's a wonderful organization. Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists have been active in the Parliament of the World's Religions since its founding. And it was founded in 1893 by Swami Vivekananda. And we're going to begin with a clip from his actual speech. And it's a bit scratchy because it was recorded in 1893. But we'll listen to it now, and I'll talk to you when we're done listening to it and tell you why this is so important. It was the beginning of interfaith dialogue, and he mentions in his remarks that there is truth in all religions, which is very refreshing. So we'll listen to this and talk to you afterwards. Truth is afterwards. Listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the afternoon session of the opening day today, the 11th of September, 1893. We now introduce you to Swami Vivekananda from India and request him to address us. Swami Vivekananda.
Sisters and brothers of America, it fills my heart with joy unspeakable to rise in response to the warm and cordial welcome which you have given us. I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of religions. And I thank you in the name of the millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. My thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who, referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you.
Again, saying, my brothers and sisters of America. And he goes on and he says, there's truth in all religions. And he talks about religious toleration. And this was 1893. There wasn't a lot of religious tolerance in those days. So this was a very important message. he did this in Chicago, and the Parliament of the World's Religions is headquartered in Chicago. We just had a convening a couple of months ago. So we'll look at our next clip. And just to let you know that every child in India learns about this speech. It's a very famous speech, particularly in India. And when President Barack Obama went to India to visit, he also begins with Swami Vivekananda's speech.
More than 100 years ago, America welcomed a son of India, Swami Vivekananda. And Swami Vivekananda helped bring Hinduism and yoga to our country. And he came to my hometown of Chicago. And there, at a great gathering of religious leaders, he spoke of his faith and the divinity in every soul and the purity of love. And he began his speech with a simple greeting: sisters and brothers of America. So today, let me say, sisters and brothers of India.
It's a bit touching when you hear Barack Obama, because he's having trouble saying Vivekananda, and he says this is a speech by Swami Vivekananda, so it kind of messes it up. But he's basically giving the same greeting, because Swami Vivekananda, when he came to Chicago, he welcomed brothers and sisters of America, and so when President Barack Obama went to India, he said brothers and sisters of India, and that's an intimate thing to say. We're not just talking about citizens, but we're talking about our brothers and sisters. And so it's a warm greeting by both Swami Vivekananda and Barack Obama. And so that's the beginning of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And there were Unitarians in Chicago in 1893. And Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists have been strong supporters of the Parliament of the World's Religions ever since. It's one of the biggest demographics that we have at the Parliament, and we have people from all religions, and it's really a pleasure working with my colleagues on the Board of Trustees who represent all kinds of different faith traditions. And I grew up in the Church of Christ, and we believed that our religion was right and everybody else's religion was wrong. And if you didn't believe what we believed, you were going to hell. And one of the nice things about Unitarianism is that, generally speaking, as a liberal faith, we don't do that. We don't talk to people. And in fact, many people at the United Nations say that it's really nice talking to Unitarian Universalists because we don't look down on other people and act like that they're going to go to hell because they don't believe what we believe. So this idea of toleration, this idea of finding truth in all faith traditions is a central tenet of the Parliament of the World's Religions, and I believe it should be and is the central tenet of Unitarianism, or at least the Unitarianism that I practice. We're going to hear a bit longer clip right now. It'll give you a little bit more detail about what the Parliament of the World's Religion is doing.
The Parliament of World Religion.
Parliament of World Religion.
So that gives you a little clip. That's one of our convenings. We convene a big delegation every 4 or 5 years. We had one just in Chicago. We had 7,000 attendees from all over the world. We had some amazing speakers. And again, it's just a wonderful interfaith dialogue where people of all different faith traditions meet together and discuss the major issues of the day. One of the biggest things that the Parliament of the World's Religions is focusing on right now is climate change. And we feel that we have an obligation as people of faith to really work very hard on climate issues. We've got another clip coming up. Let's take a look at that.
Parliament of World Religion.
The Parliament of World Religion.
So that gives you a little clip. That's one of our convenings. We convene a big delegation every 4 or 5 years. We had one just in Chicago. We had 7,000 attendees from all over the world. We had some amazing speakers. And again, it's just a wonderful interfaith dialogue where people of all different faith traditions meet together and discuss the major issues of the day. One of the biggest things that the Parliament of the World's Religions is focusing on right now is climate change. And we feel that we have an obligation as people of faith to really work very hard on climate issues. We've got another clip coming up. Let's take a look at that.
In 1893, religious leaders from around the globe came together in Chicago for the first Parliament of the World's Religions. The meeting was a groundbreaking gathering of representatives of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. Today, it is recognized as the birth of interfaith dialogue worldwide. 100 years later, at the 1993 Parliament in Chicago, religious leaders came together again to affirm the Declaration Towards a Global Ethic. The Declaration is a powerful statement of the ethical common ground shared by the world's religious and spiritual traditions. Now, 30 years later, representatives of the world's religious traditions will once again gather in Chicago to affirm human rights and the productive discourse that comes from interfaith dialogue.
The 2023 Parliament, convening in Chicago, will address one of the foundational issues of our time, the threat to freedom and human rights. We must defend freedom and human rights together and find solutions to the rise of autocracy in our world. Through this lens, gathered participants will discuss the threat to democracy, the crisis of climate change, the dignity of women and girls, the rights of indigenous peoples, engaging the next generation, peace, justice, the reduction of inequalities, and more. The Parliament will be a place of open minds and open hearts, where we can all express the wonder and dignity of our religious and spiritual traditions against the backdrop of the majestic beauty of Lake Michigan.
The world was called to Chicago in 1893 and 1993. 30 years later, the world is called again. Join us. Get involved today by becoming an exhibitor or sponsor, joining the Parade of Faiths, hosting a pre-Parliament event, or volunteering at the 2023 Parliament.
All are welcome. Register now.
Thank you. Very good. So that was obviously an advertisement for the 2023 Parliament. It's too late to register now because we've already had it. But it was a wonderful event, and we will be planning for another event in the next couple, 3, 4, 5 years. We have looked at Glasgow as a possible place where another event might happen, but we're looking at other places as well and deciding where we're going to go. It was mentioned about the global ethic, and I want to highlight that. The global ethic was actually begun by Hans Kuhn, who was one of my favorite Catholic theologians. He was a lay person, he was not a clergy, and he wrote a lot on Catholic theology. A lot of what he wrote wasn't necessarily approved by the Vatican. He had his own ideas about what theology should be about. But he came up with this idea of the global ethic. And the global ethic is basically taking ethical principles that we all can agree on, whatever religion we have, that we should all be able to agree on 4 principles. And his 4 principles were: human beings should be treated humanely, and the golden rule of reciprocity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, a commitment to peace and justice. In 2018, the Parliament of the World's Religions added a 5th directive, which didn't happen in Hans Kuhn's day. We added our own 5th directive, and the 5th directive is a commitment to a culture of sustainability and care for the earth. So those are the 5 directives of the global ethic. And we believe, and we have some evidence, at least most people of faith can agree on all of these principles. There's nothing in anybody's religion that would contradict any of the 5 principles. And so we hope that everybody can agree. And that's what the Parliament of the World's Religions is all about. It's looking at ways that, how can we all agree on certain principles and certain activities? Certainly what we need to be doing is a lot more on climate change. One of the things that I say a lot about climate change is that the experts on sustainable development, the experts that really know how to treat the earth correctly, are the indigenous peoples of the world. They, for centuries, they had water management and land management that was second to none. And it's been the industrialized societies that have messed things up. And so by going back to these indigenous peoples and working with them on how to sustain this earth and how to have forests and rivers and, sustain our water supply and sustain our soil, we really need to be working with indigenous people. So you'll see in some of the upcoming clips of the Parliament that we are paying a lot of attention to indigenous peoples. As you probably know, for much of our history, indigenous faith practices weren't considered religions at all. They were just considered heathens, and we treated them horribly. We had residential schools in Canada and the United States, Australia, and other places that were just really horrible, where we took children away from their parents and forbid them from speaking their own languages. But indigenous people have survived. They're still around, and they do hold many of the answers to our most pressing problems of climate change. If we really obey their advice on how we take care of the water and the land and the environment that we have a much better chance of surviving the coming years dealing with climate change. So we'll show the next clip, which will get a little bit more into the Parliament, and then we'll have a discussion.
Hello, friends. It is such an honor to greet the Parliament of World Religions.
Hello, and thank you so much for allowing me to join you by means of this video. I wish I could be there in person.
I'm Jim Yong Kim, President of the World Bank Group. I'm honored to have the opportunity to talk with you about a sacred and shared pursuit.
Dear respected member or delegation,
of our Parliament of Religion.
Welcome. Welcome. On behalf of the board of the Parliament of the World's Religions, with love in my heart and compassion in my mind, and a smile on our faces, to reclaim the heart of our humanity, I declare the 6th Parliament of the World's Religion open. And our political leaders, we pray that you give them sincerity.
What if this kind of gathering could get to the heart of the questions we must address?
Therefore, we, your grandmothers, your mothers, your daughters, your wives and sisters, call upon our grandfathers, our fathers, our husbands, our sons, and we call upon each other, on all people of faith, to alleviate the unwarranted deprivation and suffering of women and girls.
Stop living yesterday.
Let us pledge to live responsibly, interact respectfully, cooperate regularly, and love radically in order to demonstrate that people of multiple spiritual paths can indeed live as neighbors, can link our lives to address the common problems that confront the human family.
You saw there, before we go to the next one, we saw there Phyllis Karat. She's one of my favorite trustees. And we've invited all faith traditions, all religions to join us at the Parliament of the World's Religions. There's one faith tradition that has refused steadfastly to join us. And they've refused to join us because of Phyllis Karat. And the faith tradition that will not join us are the Mormons. And the Mormons won't join us because Phyllis Karat is a Wiccan. And she is a very high-ranking witch. And she is very strong in her faith tradition as basically the indigenous faith traditions of Europe. And of course, if we look at our history, all the European countries had their own faith traditions. And then the Christians came in, and in many cases, the Christians killed a lot of people that refused to convert and be baptized as Christians. And so she keeps alive those indigenous faith traditions of Europe. And so because of that, the Mormons won't join us, but we'll keep asking them and maybe they'll change their minds. But Phyllis is one of the best trustees we have. She certainly upholds the rights of women and girls, as she said in her remarks. It's something she cares deeply about. and her faith tradition cares deeply about. So she is one of my favorite trustees. And we have trustees that are Hindus and Sikhs and Jews and Catholics and Protestants and you name it. We have Baha'is and on and on. So Phyllis is one of my favorites. So all of the videos that you've seen so far have been past parliaments, past convenings. The one you're going to see now is a video from the convening that we just had this year in August of 2023. So we'll see the next video. So that was the convening we just had. I'm sure you saw me. I was there. Maybe you blinked and you didn't see me, but I was in the parade, and I was also actually in the last shot that you just saw at the end. One of our trustees that I really like the most, he's an Indigenous person from Canada. And he talked about the sacredness of ceremony. And he talked about the sacredness of the ceremony of dialogue, which I never thought of as a ceremony before. And I talked to him about it, and he said, yes, we consider it ceremony. And it's this idea that you dialogue with each other until you come to an understanding. And however long it takes, you just talk and you listen and you dialogue together until you come to an understanding. doesn't necessarily mean you come to absolute agreement, but at least you understand each other. And that's something I think we sorely need, to listen to each other, to talk to each other to the point, and keep doing it. You know, take as long as it takes to come to a point where we understand each other. And it's one of the things I've been saying in this, is that I think indigenous peoples have a lot of wisdom to teach us. We have a lot to learn from them. And I really appreciate that the Parliament has so many indigenous traditions and on our board of trustees, and also in all of our work. And so that's really important to us. I think we'll see a couple more clips, and then we'll talk a bit more after that. So one more clip.
Please welcome Knowledge Keeper Louis Cardinal.
Well, good evening to everyone, esteemed members of the Parliament of the World's Religions, dear participants, those here in Chicago participating live, and those participating online from all over the world. My name is Louis Cardinal. I am from the Woodland Cree, from Treaty Number 8 in northern Alberta, Canada. As a communicator and educator, I have dedicated my life's work to creating and maintaining connections and relationships that cross cultural divides. It's in that spirit, and within my capacity as trustee and chair of the Indigenous Task Force for the Parliament of the World's Religions, that I am pleased to be here to moderate this important gathering this evening, along with Zaya Guarani. Zaya.
Good evening, everyone, members and participants to the Parliament of the World's Religions. My name is Zaya Guarani. I was born and raised in an indigenous community in the remote Brazilian Amazon. And I belong to the line of the strong women from Camurap and Guarani Mibiai ethnicities, who have led their communities as both shamans and spiritual guides. Growing up in the Amazon, I shared the journey of many fellow indigenous, running away with my mother and my grandmother, seeing the village being destroyed one after another by loggers, and my relatives being killed or displaced, at the beautiful natural ecosystem surround being burned. Not many people can imagine what is live it as a child and teenager in a constant state of fear for your life and the ones that you love. But beyond the destruction of our forest, what we are seeing is also the extension of a complex ancestral spirituality and the indigenous cosmovision, a way seeing the world. This is no separation between us and nature. I had the chance to be able to escape this violence in my life at the age of 15, when I earned a scholarship in Rio de Janeiro before entering art and fashion world by founding the first ever collective of creatives indigenous. This journey led me to become the first indigenous fashion model raised and born in the Amazon rainforest, in which I remain committed to be raising awareness about ongoing global struggle for indigenous rights and climate justice.
Thank you, Zaya. We gather here tonight for a special event called An Urgent Call to Protect the Amazon, an interfaith rainforest initiative dialogue with indigenous leaders. The Parliament of the World's Religions is a founding partner of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, our IRI, a United Nations convened alliance that is bringing moral urgency and faith-based leadership to global efforts to halt and reverse tropical deforestation and protect the rights of indigenous peoples. As a part of this commitment, the Parliament and IRI are committed to fostering new relationships between religious leaders and indigenous peoples, and to have you, the religious leaders from across the globe, learn and understand firsthand the relationship between the spiritualities, traditions.
Okay, well, we can actually share these links with you, and you can see the entire clips because they're quite interesting. But there's a lot there. That was Louis Cardinal. He was the one who mentioned in an earlier speech about the idea of ceremony, the ceremony of dialogue. We also had a speech by somebody from UNEP, the UN Environmental Protection Agency at the United Nations. And I can't emphasize enough, and I'm sure many of you know this already, but the Amazon forest is one of our greatest protections against climate change. And the United Nations has said the more of the Earth's surface that can be covered with natural forests, the better off we're going to be. And the fact that many of the trees in the Amazon are being cut down for the purpose of cattle raising, to have land for cattle, we're choking ourselves. It's the forests that absorb the carbon in the atmosphere and protect us from global warming. And the Amazon is our biggest lungs on the face of the earth. There are many other forests in Africa and elsewhere. The more we can preserve these forests and make sure that they do not diminish but actually increase, the better off we're going to be. I just watched PBS tonight, as I always do, and they were mentioning that in Kenya, they are planting 100 million trees. And it's this idea that by planting 100 million trees and letting them grow and taking care of them, that helps sustain our planet. So that's pretty much the Parliament of the World's Religions. There's much more that we could discuss, and I'd rather just kind of take questions and hear what you have to say. But I did mention the global ethic, which is really important for us. As I said, Hans Kuhn came up with the four divisions, the four aspects of the global ethic, and we have added the fifth one, which is a care for Earth. And we did that in 2018, directive. So we have 5 directives now: respect for life, economic justice, truth and compassion, women's rights, and care for the earth. So I don't know if you have any other questions about the Parliament. Again, Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists have been active in the Parliament from the founding, from 1893 onwards. We have been there and in a dialogue with other religions. It's one of the things that I admire, is that we have always been open to other faith traditions. I'm fearing now that the UUA is becoming much more insular and quite dogmatic about You have to believe what they tell you to believe, and if you don't, then you just take a hike. That's not our tradition, and that's certainly not the tradition that Unitarians have had at the Parliament of the World's Religions. We've been in dialogue with all of the other faith traditions, and it's this idea: let's listen and learn from each other, without being dogmatic, but without being judgmental and saying, well, your religion is not the right one, or you're not doing things the right way. It's much better to listen and learn and find ways to have common cause. And one of the things that we've really emphasized is the idea of care for the earth. So we have a climate task force, which is very active. The other thing that I'm beginning to try to bring into the Parliament is the abolition of nuclear weapons. And I've just gotten the Parliament to endorse an interfaith manifesto, basically saying that we really need to abolish nuclear weapons for the planet. I'm sure many of you feel that the war between Ukraine and Russia, and between Israel and the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, these are big risk factors. And I think many of us are afraid that it could lead to nuclear war, which is why it is so important that we get rid of nuclear weapons altogether. These are the existential threats that we have on Earth. One is climate change, but the other is nuclear weapons. So we are working at the Parliament on both those issues. And I know that Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists are working on these issues too. But as I said before, I think it's really important for us to listen and learn, and not be dogmatic and not be judgmental, and not tell people, oh, you're not right because you don't believe what we believe. It's much better to listen and understand what others believe and find ways to have common cause. And we do have the global ethic, which has 5 directives that we think that everybody can agree on, and we could certainly expand that. We might expand that here tonight and come up with even new ideas that we can all agree on. But I'm happy to take questions and have a dialogue. I think we'll break out later in breakout groups, but I think this is time for questions, if I'm not mistaken. Stephen will tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong, Bruce. And thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.